Consummate Toastmaster. He has been a past district governor. He is a distinguished Toastmaster. He is an accredited speaker. When he stands up in front of a group, you say, now there is a tall, handsome, intelligent speaker. But I know a secret. This Toastmaster is probably the only one that I know of who did not attend his 5th grade graduation because of jury duty. So I think we could say that he is a tall, handsome, and will forget the intelligent speaker. Speaking on the subject, or the title, of course, no problem, my pleasure. DTM Wayne Choate.
Well, Dave, thank you very much for that very nice, unusual introduction, I might say. And good morning, Sandpiper.
Good morning. Morning.
Good morning. You know, I am so glad to be on Dave's program this morning, Herbie. I think it's been about 6 months since I've spoken here at Sandpipers, and I have a lot to tell all of you. And I think the best way I can set the table is to first of all say this. I don't know how many of you know this or not, but I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. Or have I mentioned that?
No.
Nashville, Tennessee. Tennessee, that great state with a population of over 7 million people and only 5 last names. You know, the biggest challenge I have about coming from Tennessee is I have to convince so many people that that movie Deliverance was not a documentary about Tennessee. But I am here today because just recently I was in the Deep South. I had the opportunity to go back to the Deep South. And while I was back there, I was reminded of some pearls of wisdom, some southern gems, and I want to share them with you here today. In fact, if you'll stay with me this morning, if you'll stay in this room mentally, if you'll stay on channel 1, Suzanne, don't reach for your remote control and change channels on me. If you stay with me here today, my promise to you is I'm going to extend an invitation to you to adopt, to embrace, to accept one of these pearls of wisdom and incorporate it into your life. So stay with me. I'm going to extend that invitation to you. Now, when I went back to the Deep South, Jim, I went to Richmond, Virginia, the capital of Virginia. And I'll never forget it. I walked into the historic Jefferson Hotel. Oh, it was a beautiful hotel. You walk in and there's this huge white statue of Thomas Jefferson. There's portraits of Jefferson all over the wall. Oh, it's a plush, 5-star hotel. I just knew when I walked in there that this was the kind of hotel that if you stayed there, the towels in the room were so thick and fluffy, you'd probably have trouble getting your suitcase closed. This was a luxurious hotel. And I walked up to the get-in desk. That's my first pearl of wisdom. Back there they call it a get-in desk. Out here in California we call it registration. I walked up to the get-in desk and the fellow behind the desk had this name tag on. I'll never forget it. It said Elmer Joe Tackett. All 3 names, Elmer Joe Tackett. I walked up to them and I said, Elmer Joe Tackett, I believe you are my new best friend. He said, what do you mean? I said, Elmer Joe Tackett, would you by chance have a room available for me and my new bride here at your 5-star hotel for tonight? Would you have a room available for me? And what he said, I'll never forget. He said, of course, no problem, my pleasure. Oh boy, those were words of music to my ears. I mean, they just permeated my mind. I just thought it was, and you know, the interesting thing was, it seemed as though Elmer Joe Tackett enjoyed saying those words. Of course, no problem, my pleasure. Say it with me now. See if it feels good to you. Of course, no problem,
my pleasure.
Well, we went up to the room and we enjoyed the room. It was as luxurious as you can imagine a 5-star hotel would be. The next morning, James, we went down for breakfast. And I was enjoying my southern breakfast there. And the wait staff, I called him over, I said, excuse me, I said, would it be possible for me to get a little more of that country gravy and some biscuits? Could I have that? Do you know what he said?
Of course.
Of course, no
No
problem,
problem.
my
My
pleasure.
pleasure.
And it looked like he just enjoyed expressing those words, and boy, it made me feel good as I enjoyed that country gravy and biscuits. And then after breakfast, I went to the concierge and I said, you know, my wife and I are running behind schedule. Would you have my car brought around? We got to catch a plane. We're behind schedule. Would you mind bringing the car around for me? He said, of course, no problem, my pleasure. Doesn't that feel good? He seemed to enjoy it, and I enjoyed it. And when we went out to the car to load the car, I really appreciated the fact that the fellow who was loading the luggage into the car, he didn't say anything at all about the bulging suitcase. We're really enjoying those towels, Damien, I'll tell you that. And I said to him, I said, now we're running behind schedule. We got to get to the Richmond airport. What is the fastest way to get there? I said, could you give me directions? You know what he told me? Of course. No problem. My pleasure. And it looked like he just was enjoying expressing those words. And after we left the Richmond Hotel, we went down into Nashville, Tennessee, my hometown. Did I mention I was from Nashville?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
Well, I was back there, and maybe it's because Dave, in his introduction, mentioned about me missing my 5th grade graduation. But I was reminded of the great story of Bubba. I don't know how many of you know this or not, but every little boy, every little girl growing up in the state of Tennessee, they have one goal, one dream, one aspiration, and that is to someday graduate from the University of Tennessee. And I'd love to tell the story of Bubba. And I think I mentioned to most of you that there are a lot of Bubbas in the Deep South. In fact, Dave, about every other person that you meet in the Deep South is named Bubba. And I'll never forget the first Bubba that I ever met. And you know, she really wasn't that bad. A lot of Bubbas in the Deep South. Well, I'd love to tell the story of Bubba, who, after graduating from East Nashville High School, Dave, he went up to Knoxville to take the entrance exam so that he might be admitted to the University of Tennessee to make his dream, his goal, his aspiration a reality. So Bubba goes up to Knoxville, he sits down, and he sails through the first 49 questions of the entrance exam, and he came to the last question, and the last question was, what's what? Bubba put down, I don't know what's what. Well, he was notified a couple of weeks later that he did pretty good on the test, but he missed that all-important last question of what's what. They told him to study up, come back up in a couple of weeks. They'll let him take the test again. 2 weeks later, Bubba was back up at Knoxville, sat down. He sailed through 49 totally different entrance exam questions, came to that last question. It was the same question, what's what? Again, Bubba put down, I don't know what's what. Well, he was notified that he would not be admitted to the University of Tennessee. Well, it broke the young boy's heart. He went back to Nashville. He was despondent. He was in despair. He was in a state of depression. And his girlfriend, she was so smart. His girlfriend, Becky Sue, could see that he was in depression. And she said, what we need to do is go out to Old Hickory Lake, rent us a canoe, and just roll around that lake. It'll be a hot August Tennessee sun that we'll be enjoying. That'll take you out of your depression. So they go out to Old Hickory Lake, they rent themselves a canoe, and Bubba's rowing that canoe, looking off to the shore, and Becky Sue Don is dressed in a skimpy two-piece bikini. Are you getting nervous about this story? Becky Sue was dressed in this skimpy two-piece bikini, and Bubba, he's rowing, looking off to the shore. Yes, he was, Shirley. He was looking off to the shore. He wasn't looking at Becky Sue in that skimpy two-piece bikini. He was a boy of character. His father was a distinguished Toastmaster. So Bubba's rowing that canoe, looking off to the shore, and Becky Sue decides she's going to get some more of that hot August Tennessee sun. So she leans back into the canoe, and when she does, the halter top on her skimpy two-piece bikini comes off and hits the bottom of the canoe. Bubba said, what's that? Becky Sue said, what's what? He said, honey, if I knew that, I'd be a freshman at the University of Tennessee right now. See, you gotta know what's what. Those people at the Jefferson Hotel knew what's what. They knew how important it was to express those words of course, no problem, my pleasure. They knew that. And the thought occurred to me this morning as I thought about sharing these pearls of wisdom with you, that what a better club we would be if you were to adopt that phrase, of course, no problem, my pleasure. For example, when our educational vice president, Dave Coulter, hands you your monthly schedule of assignments, if he were to say to each one of you, now you take a look at the agenda for the next 4 weeks, I've assigned you, will you be able to fulfill that role?
Of course. No problem. My pleasure.
Can you imagine how that would make Dave feel? And I suspect you would feel better as a result of saying, let's say, for example, that Patrick McGoldrick, who, if he behaves himself, we're going to let him be our nominating committee chair for the next slate of officers. What if Patrick were to walk up to you, Hank, and say, Hank, if we were to nominate you for a club office to serve Sandpiper's Toastmasters, would you accept that nomination?
Sure.
How do you think he would feel if you were to say, of course, no problem, my pleasure? Here in Sandpipers, that's one way that we can enhance our membership and improve our club if we would just adopt, of course,
No problem.
my pleasure. Let's take it to our personal life. Shirley, what about you? If you were to go home tonight and after dinner, if after dinner you were to say to Jim, your husband, Jim Spencer, honey, you know, they beat me up today and I'm kind of tired. Would you mind doing the dishes and cleaning up after dinner tonight so that I can rest? Let me ask you, Shirley, after you got over that shock of him saying, of course, no problem, my pleasure, how would that make you feel?
Hallelujah.
And I suspect Jim would feel great as a result because his stock would go way up. So all I tried to do here today, Dot, is to impress upon you these pearls of wisdom that come only from the Deep South. Of course, no problem, my pleasure. Incorporate it into your membership in Toastmasters. Incorporate it into your business life, into your personal life. Because I think it's important enough to change your whole disposition just by expressing these 3 words. I've seen it in those individuals there at the Jefferson Hotel. I can see it in you. How important is it? Dave, maybe I can sum it up in rhyme if I can remember the words to this poem. Mathematicians can't add without the number 2, and artists can't paint and avoid the color blue. Well, authors can't write without the letter E, and composers can't compose and avoid the note of G. Well, it's much the same with everyone that we meet. More than ever before, you got to know what's what to make your life complete. Mr. Toastmaster.